Hare Krishna. Welcome back to our study of the Yoga Sutras. Now we are almost at the end of the first chapter, Samadhi Pada. In the previous two sessions, we went to this very abstract understanding of the concept of Savichara, Nirvichara, Savitarka, and Nirvitarka Samapattis, how the yogi's mind absorbs deeper and deeper into that meditative practice, and how one starts to involute even the object of meditation. So how far does this involution continue? We discussed that it involutes up to the concept of pradhan, which is the most fundamental, primordial understanding of the state of matter. So what happens to the yogi's understanding after that is going to be highlighted in today's particular class. And we are going to discuss 4 sutras, which is going to take us into almost at the end of this journey of Samadhi. So let us see Sutra number 46. This is how it goes. Ta eva sabija samadhihi. So all of these that we discussed, right? So including, what is this? Nirvitarka, Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, Ananda and Asmita. All of them together, ta eva indeed are sa bija. Bija here means a seed or some kind of a support. Samadhihi, complete absorption, right? So what does it mean? Each of the above kind of samadhi are sabija, which are dependent upon a prakritic support. Meaning, for a yogi to enter into these states and go beyond also, as to progress through these states, one is still holding on to a material notion of the object of meditation. In this case, a rose, right? When the yogi is saying, I am meditating on a rose, we are meditating on the material shape, form, characteristics of the rose, right? So that is material, that is prakriti, right? Even when one is experiencing, that experience is also happening, right? Based on certain material notion of that particular object, to the point even where the state of I am at the asmita stage, where one comes to a state of just I am, even that am is a small trace of the false ego which is still there, which means the yogi's meditation is still supported by one of those material elements, in this case ahankar. And the real samadhi is when one transcends even that layer of ahankar and comes to the most deepest state of I, right? That is real samadhi, that is a real nirbija samadhi or supportless samadhi. So right now, because there is still the support of prakriti, material nature. If you remember the previous sutra, we said that involution continues till the point of pradhan, where one starts looking at that object of meditation at its most primordial level. But even that, is, looking at the object at its prakritic layer. So this is what the word sabija, an important terminology for us. So all the techniques that we heard so far, right? In sutra number 42 and 43, we saw Savitarka and Nirvitarka. In 44, we saw Savichara and Nirvichara. And likewise, in Sutra 17, earlier on, we spoke about Ananda and Asmita. And also the Asampragyata Samadhi, where in the interruption between any of these stages, the yogi experiences, this other kind, Anyaha, the other kind of Samadhi, which we call it Asampragyata Samadhi in Sutra number 18. All of these put together, they come in this category called as Sabija, which means the yogi is still taking support of prakriti, of material nature, to enter into those states of samadhi, right? But something interesting is going to happen, as one proceeds in this journey and goes just past the nirvichara samadhi. What happens? Sutra number 47 says, Nirvichara Vaisharadhye Adhyatma Prasadaha. Nirvichara Vaisharadhye, Vaisharadi, pure. As one masters over that Nirvichara Samadhi and becomes pure, then Adhyatma Prasadaha. Adhyatma, now it is no more Prakriti. The opposite of Prakriti is Adhyatma. Prakriti is material nature. Adhyatma means one's true spiritual self. That spiritual self, Prasadaha, it starts coming out, shining very clearly, right? So how the translation goes? In the purity of Nirvichara Samadhi, the inner self shines. So you can see there is a shining that comes after that Nirvichara Samadhi stage, right? Which means at that stage, this is the, where the stage where the true light of the self starts manifesting very brightly. That is all that becomes a very dominant part of one's awareness. That is why that Ananda means, that state of bliss that starts to manifest. See, understand, bliss is not something that is coming from outside of us. Bliss is something that is already there. We are bliss. I don't need an external support to experience that happiness, but rather I just need to remove those external blockages to experience my own real internal happiness. And that is why this is such a powerful sutra. The moment that inner self starts shining, one starts experiencing that Ananda or unlimited bliss, right? And in this particular bliss, this particular Adhyatma Prasada, or this kind of internal spiritual light which is coming out, Patanjali uses a term for it. He says, Ritambhara Tatra Pragya. Ritambhara, right? So this is another important term to understand. That light which is coming out, he calls it as the truth-bearing wisdom, right? What is this truth-bearing wisdom or Ritam? Now, the word Ritam is a very popular word in the many Vedic and Upanishadic genre of literatures, right? You don't hear it so much in the Puranic literatures, but rather, especially in the Upanishads and especially in the Rig Veda, you hear this word Ritam a lot. Satyam Vadishyami, Ritam Vadishyami, many prayers also you hear this word, right? What is this word Ritam? Now, it is described, the Vedas describe that when this universe was created, along with all the matter which the universe is comprised of, certain fundamental order also has been incorporated into this universe. Like for example, law of gravity, something that we can relate from our modern understanding, right? So when the universe was created, the concept called as gravity was also induced, a concept called as law of thermodynamics. Heat transfers from a hot source to a cool source. It doesn't happen the opposite way, right? A cold object cannot heat a hotter object. So there are certain fundamental order of this whole universe, what we may call as laws of physics or whatever it may be, right? But even the laws of physics are still observing matter from its gross state. Ritam is at a much, much more deeper level of understanding. This Ritam is what that starts manifesting. This understanding of this Ritam or this truth-bearing wisdom dawns into the consciousness of the yogi. Because all the while the yogi has been using one's own material mind, intelligence as a support to go deeper, at Vitarka and Vichara, one was still using one's intelligence and mind to go deeper into absorption. But now, one is no more looking from a material perspective. One looks even beyond the understanding of Pradhan also, which is the most primordial state of matter. One transcends even that and starts looking at things from a pure spiritual perspective. So this, to give you a very ordinary example that we can relate with, when somebody when an uneducated person, somebody who's unaware, looks at a device of a phone like this, right? One may think, oh, it is just some block of matter, right? Like a brick or a phone really doesn't make a difference. But somebody who has that wisdom of how to use this phone will understand, oh, there are so many things that can be done. I can contact the world. I can take, good photography with it. All the features of the phone, one who understands. So the vision changes. It's no more just a block of matter, but rather it has a deeper understanding, right? Just like how knowledge gives deeper understanding of things, spiritual knowledge or spiritual wisdom gives the deepest understanding of things, right? And that is what this word Ritam means. There's another word that is also commonly used in the Vedic literature. It is called as Satyam. Satyam means truth. Well, Satyam is relative truth. Ritam is an absolute truth, right? It is something that does not change. To give you an example of Satyam and Ritam, of relative and spiritual truths, to say that human beings eat food or animals eat food is true. It is Satyam. It is a relative truth, right? But the same principle in its spiritual perspective, it could mean that consciousness, life, needs support from another form of consciousness called as food. Right? This is how the Upanishads define. Because consciousness needs to be nourished. So it is not just the food which is nourishing us, but rather within that food, there is this spiritual potency, and that spiritual potency is what that is nourishing us, right? And that is why we, in the Vedic context, food is such a sacred thing. Everything has its own sacred relevance. Likewise, food also has its own sacred relevance. So when you say you're not just eating food, but rather the term that is used is you are honoring food or you're respecting food, because such a yogi understand that it is not that I'm just eating some grapes or some fruits or something, but rather one understands actually the Supreme Lord has invested his potency in this food. And by eating that food, I'm accessing that potency, which is going to nourish me. And that is why you see, food is not just nourishing your physical body, it is also nourishing your mental body, right? You know, if you don't eat food, you get cranky. You may say, hey, crankiness is a state of mind. Food has something to do with my body. How are these two connected, right? So you understand that way. Food not only is nourishing your physical body, but it's also nourishing your mental body. It makes you happy. It makes you satisfied. It makes you feel contented. That is all happening because there is some energy in that food, which is also satisfying your mind. And that is why you will see sometimes your physical body may be nourished, but your mental body may not be nourished. You may still feel very dissatisfied after eating food. Your stomach may be full, right? But then you will feel like, this food is not good. I'm not satisfied. I didn't like this food. Because there is some subtle energy in that food that also nourishes your mind. Likewise, there is also some spiritual potency in food that also nourishes the soul, right? So this is the rhythm level of understanding things, right? So this concept of rhythm and satyam is very nicely mentioned in many Vedic literatures. So here Patanjali is using that term so that people can relate with that. He says that rhythm bhara pragya, that spiritual truth bearing pragya, bearing wisdom, is what that gets manifested in the yogi at that particular stage. So then now one is no more relying on one's material experiences or material knowledge or most refined material understanding also, but rather it is now spiritual wisdom which the yogi is now completely absorbed in, right? And what is specialty of the spiritual wisdom? Patanjali mentions in the next sutra. He says, Shrutanumana pragyabhyam anya vishaya visherarthatvat. Shruta, Shruti here means what you hear. Basically, Shruti is another word that is used for the Vedic literatures. Because in the Vedic times, there were no books. People would not write these scriptures down, but rather it was passed on from the teacher to the student just by verbally reciting it. So the teacher would regularly recite those mantras and those Vedic texts, and the student regularly by hearing would memorize them. And that is how the student would pass it on to their next generation and so on. So it was a tradition of verbal connection of hearing and speaking. So the word Shruti therefore means scriptures, that which are heard. So Shruti, the Vedic scriptures, Anumana. Anumana here means logical deduction. If you remember when we discussed the 5 pramanas earlier on in this book, we said this direct perception, pratyaksha, or the right perception or correct perception happens based on 3 things, right? Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agamaha. Direct perception through senses, Anumana through logical deduction, inference, and through Agama, through the Vedic literatures or Shruti. So here he is talking about the same 2 concepts. Though we understand Pratyaksha, direct perception can sometimes be flawed, but our logic and scriptures, they are quite reliable. But here Patanjali is asking us to transcend even those. Shruti and Anumana Pragyabhyam, the knowledge that you get from both scriptures and your own logical deductions, Anyaha, it is different. This Ritambhara Pragya, this wisdom of the soul which is coming out, is different even from the scriptures and even your own material intellectual logic. And he calls this as it is Vishesha Arthatvat, right? It is a special kind of knowledge. So that is how the translation goes. This special truth is totally different from knowledge gained by verbal testimony, that is scriptures, study of scriptures, or inference or anumana. Right? So what does it mean? Is Patanjali undermining Vedic scriptures? No, but rather he's asking us to go deeper in the words of scriptures, go deeper in the unspoken words of scriptures. Because remember, we discussed this many times in this course. Many times words have a limitation in communicating the meaning because of the very nature of language and even the very nature of communication. right? Because not everything is logical and not everything can be articulated. Some things need to be experienced, and that experience sometimes can never be communicated cent% through words. And that is why Patanjali is saying that, even the scriptural words, though the scriptures are unlimited and beyond all flaws, because of the words, the language, and our own understanding, many times we may not deeply understand the deepest meaning of the scriptural injunctions. But at this stage, after the Nirvitarka Samapatti, at that particular stage, when this Ritambhara Pragya starts manifesting, this spiritual truth or the special truth, it gets revealed. And at that stage, one understands the deepest meaning, the unspoken meaning of the scriptures as well. Right? This is the state of realized wisdom. And that is the state in which the yogi starts to operate. And this is the key for us to enter into the next stage, something that we'll discuss in the concluding session of the first chapter. So see you all soon. And in the next session, we'll also have a comprehensive overview of this entire chapter as well. So join us there. See you all very soon. Hare Krishna.